Hi guys, and welcome to every episode of The Simpsons Season 4 reviewed. It has taken me quite a while to get around to doing this, but with what's going on in the world at the minute, I have no better excuse than to sit down and watch these episodes, and as you'll hopefully find out, I have indeed enjoyed watching them. Now of course Season 4 is one that I remembered very fondly, because it is kind of in the prime of The Simpsons classic years. So as ever, I'll go through every single one of the 22 episodes here, telling you my thoughts about them, and how I think they stack up. Of course, as usual, I would like to thank the Simpsons wiki for letting valuable information that I literally cannot live without in terms of doing the trivia for these episodes. And with that said and done, without further ado, let's get into watching some episodes, shall we? Season 4, Episode 1, Kamp Krusty. Bart and Lisa get to spend 6 weeks of the summer at Kamp Krusty. However, they soon find out that the camp is not what it seems. So some trivia for this one is that this episode was originally produced for the 3rd season, but it was pushed back to open a 4th instead. My best moment was the kids taking back control of the camp. So the rating I give this one is a 4 out of 5. Now I will be honest and say that I did expect this to be a 5 going into it. Ultimately though, even though there are some fine jokes and moments here, especially early doors, I find that the plot suffers a bit from being too predictable, and the ending was nothing special either. As I said though, I did like the start with Bart trying to convince Homer to let him go to Kamp Krusty, and seeing how run down it is with the bullies and Barney dressed up as Krusty sets up the end where the kids revolt very well. I also like just how naturally and easily Bart takes control and goes about running the camp in his own name, doing things how he wants to do it. In terms of the Krusty side of things, they're okay. We get a few cutaway scenes of him doing various unrelated things to show just kind of how complacent he is with licensed things under his name. That is typical of Krusty, of course, and he does come across as a jerk at times, to be honest, but at least he makes up for it to the kids in the end. As I said though, the ending where he just appears and takes them all to Mexico, it just happens so fast and it just kind of comes across as a rush to me, which kind of took something away from the episode, unfortunately. Season 4, Episode 2, A Streetcar Named Marge. Marge, bored by being stuck in a house, decides to audition for a musical production of A Streetcar Named Desire. Soon, tension begins to show between her and Homer. So the scene here with hundreds of babies sucking their pacifiers in the daycare centre is actually a reference to the film The Birds, but on that occasion it is the birds that are sitting on perches. My best moment was Marge attacking Ned with a bottle after being enraged by Homer. So, what rating do I give this one? I give it a 4 out of 5. So, it is nice to see Marge have a starring role so early in this season, as I felt that she was somewhat lacking in them in season 3. Of course, it did quickly evolve into a look at her marriage, and Homer's rudeness and selfishness are cranked up to the max here, and the episode gives us several scenes just dedicated to how much of a jerk he can be, and that is all well and good, but it's not like we don't know that already by this point in the show. As expected, the ending, of course, has Homer getting Marge back on side, but hey, at least he showed that he listened to the play a little, so that is something, right? Speaking of the play, I think it produces quite a few good moments. Seeing Marge interact with Ned in this way is very interesting, as we don't seem to see those characters get that much screen time together, and when they do, I actually think they work well. There was also a nice little subplot here with Maggie at the Ayn Rand daycare centre. I do enjoy those scenes, as it's always nice to give Maggie something relevant to do for a change, and the way that she gives the babies back their pacifiers is a fun little action sequence. The jokes here, although decent, were not amazingly funny to me, which holds the episode back just a bit. Season 4, Episode 3, Homer the Heretic. After Homer enjoys skipping church one cold Sunday morning, he decides to give it up for good, much to Marge's disapproval. So God, who makes his first appearance in this episode, is actually the only character in the show to have 5 fingers on each hand. Leave it to God to get it right, I suppose. So, the Flanders family chasing after Homer is my favourite moment. I just love how over the top they are about it. So, do I like this episode as much as Homer likes staying at home? Yes, I do indeed. It's a 5 out of 5 for me. I did indeed think that this was a fantastic episode. It has a thoughtful plot, combined with a lot of funny moments too. I loved how quickly it starts off and gets into the premise of Homer staying at home, and the scenes of him just lounging around the house are great. Things like him in the shower on a cold day, and him tucked up in bed, are just so relatable. They also do a good job of providing a contrast from that to what the people at the church are going through with the blizzard conditions. The religious side of things is only touched on really, but for what it is, I think they did a solid job of showing that there are of course 2 sides to the story. I very much like how it is highlighted in the end that the people who saved Homer from the fire were all from different backgrounds and religions. Also, on that ending, how can you not love Ned's attempt to save Homer? I think we all felt for him when Homer bounced back into the burning house. Ned could just never catch a break, can he? So, my overall feelings on this is that it's just a memorable one all round. There are too many good jokes to name, and given how many memes are still going around about this episode online, it goes to show that the content here has stood the test of time. Season 4, Episode 4, Lisa the Beauty Queen. Homer tries to boost Lisa's confidence by entering her into a beauty pageant. After Lisa earns the crown, she uses her new platform to fight back against corruption. So the trivia here is that when Lisa is announced as Little Miss Springfield, Marge is standing beside her with a somber look, wearing a pink Chanel dress. And this is of course a reference to Jacqueline Kennedy after the assassination of President Kennedy. My best moment was Krusty getting struck by lightning after teasing Lisa, as you can see in the picture there. So episode 4 gets a 4 out of 5. Yeah, this again is pretty solid. The plot is nothing spectacular, but it does have its nice moments, such as Homer being a good father to Lisa, and the moral at the end about being able to stand up for what you believe in. That is of course an important moral to be heard. It may be cliche, but it's true. You really do have to stand up for what you believe in, especially if you've got some kind of position of power. I did find that it took a while to get going though, and just how down Lisa got over a caricature, it was a bit over the top, even if that was kind of the point. They did make the most out of the beauty contest at least. It was fun to see Krusty's half-assed way of hosting it. The comedy on offer here is okay for the most part. I did like Skinner being a badass at the start, as well as the bits involving the Duff blimp. In fact, I nearly gave this a 5, but in the end I felt the main Lisa plot was not quite as impactful as I would have hoped. Season 4, Episode 5, Treehouse of Horror III. So, this episode contains 3 spooky tales, which in this one are Clown Without Pity, King Homer, and as Dial Z for Zombies. The trivia here is that this is the first Treehouse of Horror episode to both contain a couch gag and have a closing credits show in green instead of a standard yellow. The best moment for me was the Frogut scene. How can you not love that scene? It's iconic for a reason. The way the lines are delivered, how many layers there are to the joke, it's just so great. So, my rating for this one is a 5 out of 5. And it is just another great Treehouse of Horror. I don't know whether it's better than last year's or not, but it would be close. The first part is simple enough. It's just your kind of classic evil dog thing going on here. It did throw up some funny moments though, mainly through Homer's interactions with the doll. I also liked how the cause and solution of the whole thing was just a simple good or evil switch on the back of a doll. That's just so cliche that it just works for me. The second part was also quite interesting. It may not be the funniest thing in the world, but as far as King Kong parodies go, this one does it pretty well. They just nail the whole vibe of it, and I think the fact that it's shot in black and white just adds to the charm. And Smithers' women and seamen don't mix line always gets a laugh out of me. The final part is perhaps the weakest, being a rather typical zombie story. That being said though, it's still very watchable. I did like the zombies finding Homer's brain to be hollow, and Homer's "he was a zombie" line after shooting Flanders is of course a classic. Season 4, Episode 6, Itchy and Scratchy, the movie. In an attempt to stop Bart's bad behaviour, Homer and Marge come up with the ultimate punishment. They stop him from ever being able to see the new Itchy and Scratchy movie. So something interesting to see is that in the future scene, you can see the picture of Bart saying, "Do not sell to this boy," still posted in the box office at the Aztec Theatre. The best moment, for me, was the ending, with Homer and Bart finally going to see the movie. So, did I enjoy this one? You bet I did. It gets the max rating of a 5 out of 5. So this is kind of a funny one to me, as it never comes to mind when I think of classic Simpsons episodes, but every time I watch it I always just come away loving it. This time was no different. I found it to be great in both the humour and story department. First off, in terms of the story, it's nice to finally get a good idea of how Bart is able to keep getting away with being mischievous, as well as how Homer has to learn to actually stand his ground and punish him. All credit to him though, he does stick to his guns this time, and it all works out for the best in the end. The scene of them being able to see the movie together, as I mentioned, in the future, with Bart having become Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, is great. So yeah, as Homer's punishment does seem kind of harsh at first, it all works out well in the end, and even leads to a touching moment. And as they are watching the movie, that "mouse is a jerk" line from Homer always kind of does well to me. Itchy is indeed a jerk, just like a lot of these cartoon mouses are. Tom for the win in Tom and Jerry, by the way. Jerry's such a jerk in that show. Anyway, I've been sidetracked enough, let's get back to the episode. As I was saying, the main plot is great, but the fun moments are just as good. Homer imagining the moon landing, the whole parent and teacher meeting, and Homer promising to bring back either poison or pizza, those are all just fantastic moments. I honestly could list quite a few more, jokes that hit the mark for me. but I think you get the point. This is just a little gem of an episode. Season 4, Episode 7, Marge Gets a Job. When the house needs expensive repairs, Marge gets a job at a nuclear power plant to help pay for it. However, Mr. Burns soon becomes attracted to her. So, something to note here is that Marge's workstation is called Room 101, and Homer sends unwanted paperwork down a memory hole. Both of those things, of course, in reference to George Orwell's 1984. My best moment was the Troy McClure foundation repair video. Seeing Homer just screw up as he tries these basic things are just classic. So this one gets a 3 out of 5 from me. I found that this episode started off quite brightly. All of the jokes revolving around the house needing foundation repairs. They were pretty good. And the setup of a job being open at the plant was also good. The way Mr. Burns so callously treats a retiring employee at his own party is funny in just how cruel it is. Marge getting a job at the plant is also interesting. And it's always good to get Marge out of the house a bit. The fact that Burns falls for her is an odd twist at first, but hey, he does have a history on the show of liking those Bouvier women. I must admit though, things start to drag a bit once Marge actually gets a job. There's just not too many funny moments for me, and I find it a tad boring. When they get to the end, however, it picks up a bit. I do find it interesting how Mr. Burns decides to let Homer and Marge basically get off without punishment. He even throws them a concert. Poor Tom Jones though. The reason I find that ending so interesting is that it's kind of left up in the air as to whether Mr. Burns fully got over Marge, which is something interesting to think about going forward. There is a little Bart side plot here, and it is exactly what it says on the tin. It is a typical boy cried wolf story. It was okay. The best part of it though was Willie's wolf wrestling. Season 4, Episode 8, New Kid on the Block. After the Simpsons get new neighbours, Bart develops a crush on teenager Laura Powers. Meanwhile, Homer gets kicked out of an all-you-can-eat seafood restaurant for eating too much. According to Bart's phone call to Moe's, the Simpsons family's original address is 1094 Evergreen Terrace, rather than the 742 that would later become the norm. The best moment was Lionel Hutz's false advertising lawsuit against the film The Never-Ending Story. So, straight in with this one, it was a 5 out of 5. And this was a comfortable 5 out of 5 at that. The main plot was very charming, and it showed Bart's first crush in a kind of down-to-earth way. And you can also see why he liked Laura so much, as she comes across as very fun but also likeable at the same time. You can tell that some time was put in by the writers into showing how much Bart was thinking about her. So, to see how disappointed he is, to find out that she's dating Jimbo, of all people, just has an even bigger impact than it would normally do. As far as the idea floated here that women tend to prefer bad boys, that may be somewhat controversial, but hey, it's still one that has some amount of truth in it, in my opinion. Now, the way they finish the story is good too. Making Bart's prank calls to Moe's an actual plot point here, rather than just a throwaway gag, is a smart choice. Having Moe come to chase Jimbo away is also very clever, and leads to a touching moment to end on. In addition to that fine main plot, the Homer subplot is very good. One of the most memorable ones in the show's history, I would say. Homer eating too much as an all-you-can-eat restaurant is a fun premise and just kind of writes itself, doesn't it really? But it gets even better when Lionel Hutz gets involved. I love the bits for getting caught, such as the fake shrimp, and Marge recounting Homer's actions that night, of trying to find more fish to eat. So indeed, this is an all-time classic in my opinion, just full of funny jokes and good character moments. Season 4, Episode 9, Mr. Plow. Mr. Plow, that's my name. That name again is Mr. Plow. Sorry, I couldn't help doing that. After Homer wrecks both of the family cars in a snowstorm, he buys a snowplow and uses it to start a business called Mr. Plow. However, Barney starts his own rival business to try and steal Homer's customers. So, some trivia is that in 1993, Dan Castellaneta won his second consecutive Emmy Award for his performance as Homer in this episode. The best moment was, of course, that Mr. Plow commercial. So, probably no surprises here, but this one does indeed get a 5 out of 5 from me. This is probably one of the most well-known episodes of the show, and I would say it's easy to see why. There are a lot of memorable scenes here, and even a fun cameo appearance from Adam West. In terms of the story, it starts off by setting the scene of Homer buying the plow and setting up his business, which is all fine and dandy, but it escalates from there very quickly. And once Barney becomes his rival, that dynamic kind of works very well. It may be cliche to have friends fall out and start competing against each other, but it still manages to feel original here because of the places that they take it to. It also does not really take up that much time. I think it helps that it only kind of gets started halfway through the episode, so it does not get stale at all. And having God appear out of nowhere at the end certainly makes it unique. Now I must admit that although I think this is great, as the rating suggests, I am maybe not quite as big on this episode as some other people. I don't find myself laughing at this one as much as I do some of the other classics, but of course I do recognise that that is a purely personal taste. I still definitely respect this episode and love it for trying lots of different things, and the fact that it had most of the third act dedicated to a kind of mini adventure sequence, which is definitely fun and unique for the show. Season 4, Episode 10, Lisa's First Word. While trying to get Maggie to say her first words, Marge tells a story of how Lisa was born when they first moved house, and what her first word was. So, a probably fairly well known bit of trivia is that the Krusty Burger promotion here was actually based on a real life one that McDonald's did for the 1984 Olympics. On that occasion, prizes would be given out if the USA got a medal in certain events. And for anyone who doesn't know that story, basically it backfired massively, as the Soviets boycotted the Olympics, which led to the USA gaining far more medals than they originally thought, which led to, of course, McDonald's paying out far more than they thought, or indeed wanted to. My best moment was Bart's flashback of the clown, Flanders' grandma, and Rod and Todd, and this one gets a 5 out of 5. Now, as I've said before, I'm probably not naturally the biggest fan of flashback plots, but this one definitely won me over. The story flows very well, and wrapping it around the 1984 Olympics and the boycott was a masterstroke. It just had something like kind of to ground that episode at that point in time, which may not have aged that well, but hey, it's very memorable, so it works for all the right reasons. There are also a ton of memorable things going on, from seeing Marge and Homer house hunting to Bart staying with the Flanders. In fact, the things that Bart goes through are probably some of the most memorable things of all. I mean, who wouldn't be mentally scarred by that stupid clown bed that Homer made? It was also nice to see the impact that Lisa made once she was born. Bart may have felt left out at first, but when he ends up being Lisa's first word, it really is a touching moment. Let's not forget the ending too. Having Maggie say "Daddy" after Lisa and Bart refused to all episode is just another classic bit of television. To add to that great story were tons of great comedy, mostly involving Homer and the Olympics of course. Saying "I like those odds" in response to Krusty spitting in some of the burgers was another great moment. So when you add it all together, you're left with a great episode in pretty much every way. Season 4, Episode 11, Homer's Triple Bypass. Homer is diagnosed with clogged arteries and needs a triple bypass heart surgery, but the family cannot afford the $40,000 price tag, so Homer turns to Dr. Nick as a cheaper alternative. So a fact about the creation of this episode is that the idea originally came from James L. Brooks. However, the writers did not want to touch such a heavy topic at the time, and as such, this episode was written by freelance writers, Gary Apple and Michael Carrington. My best moment was Bart's words of comfort for Lisa. So, this one gets a 5 out of 5. Well, I guess it was kind of inevitable that we had to have an episode about Homer's health problems at some point, and for the most part, I think that they handled it well. It definitely had a mix of both emotional highs and lows, combined with some brilliant comedy. The scene when Homer's heart finally gives out after getting fired by Mr. Burns is of course great, and it leads to the family being desperate for a way to pay for the operation. After getting in some obligatory and probably well-deserved jabs in at the American healthcare system, they find Dr. Nick to do the operation, and of course, he as always brings up some great moments. In fact, this might be the most serious and workmanlike we've ever seen him portray. I mean, he at least tries to do a good job here. You actually see him studying for a change, even if he does, of course, need a little help from Lisa when he actually does the operation. As I mentioned before, my favourite scene of the episode is Bart and Lisa telling Homer what to say to each other to comfort them. That's just an all-round touching moment, and it kind of makes the stakes seem high, even though we all know that Homer will be fine in the end. Season 4, Episode 12, Marge vs. the Monorail. After collecting a $3 million fine from Mr. Burns, Springfield holds a town meeting to choose what to do with the money. Len, a stranger, named Lyle Lanley, soon convinces them to spend the money on the monorail, much to Marge's disgust. So, some trivia for all you gamers is that the monorail is a secret drivable vehicle in the Simpsons Hit and Run. It can be found on top of the monorail station in level 2. And speaking from someone who has actually played that game, it's not a particularly good vehicle. You don't probably want to be using it in races and things like that, but it's there if you want to use it. It's a cool bit of a reference. My best moment was the monorail song, of course. Homer screwing up at the end is always going to be a funny moment. Surprise, surprise, this is a 5 out of 5. Yeah, I found this episode to be very funny, with great moments throughout. The start with Homer doing the Flintstones intro kind of sets the tone for the whole thing, and from there, no time is wasted getting into the plot. As far as that goes, it's made obvious that the whole thing is a scam. but that doesn't stop the build-up and payoff from being effective. Lyle Lamley is quite charismatic, and watching the town fall for his obvious scam is just funny because of the way it is presented. Also, it's always nice to see Marge get a chance to shine, and she sure does here, even if she probably should have warned the town about the monorail way before they actually ended up getting on it. But hey, that's a small nitpick. When it comes down to having the monorail take its first drive, of course, having Homer as the conductor is just such a no-brainer for this type of thing, and it works so naturally and it adds to the experience. Now that I mentioned that, there are tons of gags here. Some of my favourite ones were I Call a Big One Bitey and the absurdity of Leonard Nimoy's cameo. So what you have with this episode when all is said and done is frankly one of the funniest Simpsons episodes ever. It's obviously not that complex plot-wise, but it does not need to be when the humour all hits the mark, and it certainly does here, in some just over-the-top and extravagant ways. Season 4, Episode 13, Selma's Choice. Selma decides that she wants to have kids of her own, so she takes Bart and Lisa to Duff Gardens to test out her parenting skills. So some trivia here is that the 7 Duffs, an obvious parody of the 7 Dwarfs, make their first appearance. That trivia may be slightly underwhelming, but it's the best I could find, so there you go. The best moment for me was when Bart dares Lisa to drink the water. It's a funny moment in and of itself, the whole ride is, but it also leads to one of my funniest moments of all time, which I'll get to in a minute. So, does this episode continue this season's fantastic run? Of course it does. Another 5 out of 5. So yeah, as you can probably guess, I enjoyed this episode a lot. It does not usually come up in discussions again about the best of the season, probably because it's surrounded by so many other greats, but in my opinion, this one still stands out on its own merit. I always like it when a show decides to expand on characters outside of the main cast, and this one does that well with Selma. Seeing how lonely she is gives some much needed depth to her character, rather than just being a patty clone. And the bit where she takes Bart and Lisa to Duff Gardens is just classic Simpsons. Most of the jokes in the episodes come from that part, I find. Lisa's "I am the Lizard Queen" is my favourite of them all. It's just so random that it always sticks with me. Whenever the chance arises to use that in some kind of conversation, I always take it. Don't ask why I find that so amusing, but it's just so random. I just love it, alright? Leave me be. The ending is also pretty good. Having Selma actually open up to Homer a bit about her struggles with the kids is nice to see for a change. The small little subplot of Homer and Marge that we get is also pretty good. Seeing how obsessed Homer was with an old mouldy sandwich was the highlight. What can I say? Just another classic episode. This season is on quite a run now, isn't it? Let's see if it can keep it up with Season 4, Episode 14, Brother from the Same Planet. After Homer forgets to pick him up, Bart is fed up and joins the Big Brother program posing as an abandoned child. He soon gets the Big Brother to hang out with, who turns out to be a much better father figure than Homer. The trivia I have here is that the chalkboard gag says the principal's toupee is not a frisbee. This is actually a reference to the fact that originally Principal Skinner was supposed to wear the toupee as a running joke. Best moment for me was the whole intro of Homer forgetting to pick up Bart. So, this one gets a 4 out of 5 from me. The streak is broken. Well, all good things must come to an end. So for this one, Homer's parenting skills are definitely under the microscope again, and although I do find most of the beginning of this episode, with Homer picking Bart up funny, I do find that it loses some steam as it progresses. Don't get me wrong, I do enjoy a few of the moments with Homer and his little brother, but the time we see Bart with his big brother is kind of less enjoyable for me. The actual meat of the story is quite simple, and all it takes is a fight to resolve the issue, albeit it is a fun fight. Seeing Homer crippled on that fire hydrant is just funny. A great bit of slapstick comedy. I did like the ending as well. It's quite sweet for both Homer and Bart to make up, and to have Tom basically adopt Peppy. We also get quite a weird subplot here with Lisa being obsessed with the Corey hotline. And I say it is weird because it does not really go anywhere or produce many great moments. It's just kind of there. That kind of leads me to my opinion on the jokes in this one. There are some good ones, mostly early on and at the aquarium, but overall they're only average for me, which leads me to the conclusion that this episode is a good one, but not a great one. Season 4, Episode 15, I Love Lisa. On Valentine's Day, Lisa takes pity on Ralph and gives him a valentine when she sees that he hasn't received any, but Ralph develops an obsession with Lisa and starts relentlessly pursuing her. So, some trivia here is that this is actually the first time it is officially revealed that Ralph is Chief Wiggum's son. And my best moment was Ralph's performance in the play as George Washington. So, do I think that Ralph's star shines brightly here? Yes, I do. 5 out of 5 this is. So, I will say that I did not remember this episode as fondly as this, but as you can tell, it really did win me over. For example, the jokes here are much better and more frequent than I recalled. Krusty by himself has a handful of good ones, and when you add that to some crackers from Homer and Chief Wiggum, you have a really funny episode. Of course, what this is remembered most for is the sweet character stuff between Lisa and Ralph. It is in character for Lisa to feel bad for Ralph, but also understandable when she gets frustrated by how clingy he is. Ralph himself gets probably the best portrayal he's ever gotten in the show. He still has a lot of dumb, wacky moments, but he also gets fleshed out much more, showing very human feelings throughout the episode. And as I mentioned, I did love seeing him come through in the end with that killer performance in the play. It is nice to see that he worked things over by himself and figured things out for himself and did not need Lisa or anyone else to hold his hand. So, in the end, all of this rounds up to a pretty classic episode and one that went up in my estimation after a rewatch. Season 4, Episode 16, Duffless. After Homer is arrested for drunk driving, Marge persuades him to give up beer for a month. Meanwhile, after Bart ruins Lisa's science fair project, she comes up with a new one to determine which is smarter, Bart or a hamster. So, some trivia, but it's really more of an error, is that in a scene at Moe's Tavern, you can see two Larrys there at once. They're both sitting down, drinking beer with the other patrons. The best moment for me was Homer recalling all of the good times he had with beer. That fake ID with Brian McGee. Who could not love that? So, Duffless gets a 5 out of 5 rating. This is just a ball to sit through, and it really is just filled to the brim with classic memorable jokes. Some that stick out to me right off the bat are Homer battling the giant spider, the Duff commercial with Nixon and Kennedy, and Wiggum mixing up DOA and DWI. In terms of the two plots that are on show here, they're both pretty good, but I also find that they both end a tad abruptly. Lisa's experimenting with Bart for a science project was also fun, but it just kind of ends as soon as Bart puts the hamster in a plane, which, to be fair, is a funny moment, but still, the ending does seem a bit underwhelming. The main plot of Homer giving up beer for a month is also pretty good, and it is interesting that they went for a light-hearted approach here. Given that alcoholism is a very serious topic, this episode could have been much darker in tone, but I am happy with the approach that they ended up taking, as this turned out to be just very funny. As far as the ending goes, it's very sweet and very nice, but I do feel it is a tad overrated by some people. After all, the Homer and Marge relationship stuff only really came up in Act 3, and was resolved very quickly. Besides, at this point in this series, it was obvious that Homer was always going to choose Marge over beer, let's be honest. Maybe fast forward 10 seasons and you might have a different outcome, but as of right now, no. But those minor grievances aside, this is still rightfully considered a classic, just for the funniness alone. Season 4, Episode 17, Last Exit to Springfield. Homer gets a job as a nuclear power plant's union leader. After Lisa is told she needs braces, he has to negotiate a deal to keep the workers' dental plan. So, this episode contains many references to pop culture, such as Batman, The Grinch, The Beatles, Moby Dick, and The Godfather, and probably many, many more that I can't list because I'd be here forever. The best moment for me, and this is really a tough one to choose, I mean, look at the picture in the top left. All of those are just great moments. But if I had to pick one, I would probably go with Abe's rambling story about an onion on his belt. So straight in with a 5 out of 5. Of course this is a 5 out of 5. This is just a phenomenal episode which has a solid plot which is made great by what else is going on. Everything that they try here seems to work, whether that be going for Godfather and Yellow Submarine parodies, or simple gags like saying dental plan over and over, which should be just filler on paper, but it just works so well. Now, as I mentioned earlier, there's too many great moments and jokes to name. Abe's rambling story to Mr. Burns is great, just because of how naturally he does it, and how even Mr. Burns is getting fed up by it. Mr. Burns' elaborate Get Smart parody, and the monkeys on typewriters are also classic moments, but as I said, there's just so many of them that I can't name them. If I'm going to pull myself away from all of the great moments for a second, and actually talk about the story, it was not the best ever, but it was still pretty solid. The fact that it was about labour unions and contracts may seem boring on paper, but it does help to ground the episode a bit, by adding some much needed character stuff. For example, Homer having to find a way to pay for Lisa's braces adds some much needed stakes, and the song that Lisa sings is pretty good, and is yet another memorable moment. Not to mention Homer and Mr. Burns' interactions, which are both great and very in character. Homer dancing on the floor is brilliant, of course, as are pretty much all of Burns' lines throughout. This might actually be one of Mr. Burns' best ever portrayals, as he is both that ruthless side, but also that kind of innocent, childlike, energetic side as well. It's very funny to watch the contrast there. I really could go on talking forever about this one because it's probably my favourite episode of all time. It's certainly up there at the very least. I know that might be kind of the safe choice for a favourite episode, but the fact that so many people rate this so highly Kind of says it all, to be honest. It's just a pleasure to sit down and watch. No matter how many times I rewatch this one, it just always works for me on every level, so yeah, just brilliant. Season 4, Episode 18. So it's come to this, a Simpsons clip show. After Bart's April Fool's prank backfires and lands Homer in a hospital, the Simpsons family reminisce about all of the good times that they've had over the years. Some trivia is that the episode was created to relieve the show's overworked staff at the time, and the original plan was to actually make 4 clip shows per season. Thank God they didn't do that, hey? The best moment for me was the April Fool's pranks between Homer and Bart at the start that kind of drive the whole episode. So this clip show gets a 2 out of 5, and well, the title says it all really. The dreaded clip show is indeed finally here, and as far as the clip show goes, this one was honestly not that bad. Unlike some, they at least tried to give this one a plot, when it starts out as a kind of innocent April Fool's prank between Homer and Bart, and most of the clips are kind of set up in a natural way because of that. As for the clips themselves, the ones that are shown are mostly classic moments from the classic era, and as such they do provide a fair bit of comedy, which does make this episode a bit easier to get through. All in all though, this is still a clip show, so I can't rate it too highly. The most memorable thing about this one might actually be the fan theory that it brought up, that Homer has been in a coma ever since Bart's prank on him. That actually got quite a bit of traction amongst the Simpsons community, believe it or not. I can't say that I believe in it, but it is an interesting thing to think about at least. So yeah, I don't have anything more to say about this one, just a clip show, not that great. Season 4, Episode 19, The Front. Convinced that they could write better Itchy and Scratchy scripts than the current writers, Bart and Lisa used Grandpa's name to get their script accepted. Some trivia is that the Flanders segment at the end was just added in order to fill in the rest of the time for the episode. And the irony of that is that the best moment for me was the adventures of Ned Flanders' sketch. So filler turned out to be the best part of the episode for me. Who could have guessed, eh? As far as what I give the episode overall, I'd say probably about 3 out of 5. Yeah, I don't really know, it's kind of an average episode. It's kind of one of the most forgettable in my opinion out of the classic seasons. Now, that is not to say that I think it's bad or anything by any means, but I just rarely hear anyone mention this episode in any kind of way at all really. That is maybe because it lacks a certain amount of star power, and it does not really have any real standout moment. I do think that what we get though was worth watching at least. The main plot was simple but fun. This is where most of the good comes from. I like Abe throughout the episode, he has a number of great lines. I always chuckle at how he says, "I did the yiggy," after learning that there is money involved. I did not really get into the subplot though much. It felt kind of rushed and surprisingly bland for a Homer story. It does not help either that we get the story of Homer not graduating from college done so much better in the future, so this kind of feels a bit redundant here. So I don't have much else to comment on with this one. It's very watchable, but nothing that I would write home about. Season 4, Episode 20, Whacking Day. After learning of the cruel Springfield tradition of killing snakes on Whacking Day, Lisa and Bart enlist the help of Barry White to try and stop the town. Some trivia is that this episode marks the first appearance of Superintendent Chalmers, a rather underrated character in my opinion as well. The best moment was, "I am evil Homer, I am evil Homer," probably the most memorable part of this episode for me. As far as my opinion overall, this one is another one that gets 3 out of 5. And I will admit that this one did not really hold up as well as I remembered. It was okay and all, and had a few good moments like the Evil Homer scene and the Barry White appearance, but other than that, it just felt a bit bland to me, almost as if the ep was kind of stuck in second gear. Both plots did come together in the end, but it was done in a way that did not feel entirely convincing. I would have hoped that Bart being expelled would have been expanded on more, and the idea of Whacking Day itself, while somewhat interesting, felt like a bit of a missed opportunity. You would usually expect some satire about this type of thing thrown in, but we did not really get any here. Only the odd throwaway remark about how Lisa thought that it was cruel. As far as the jokes go, I thought they were subpar for the most part. As I mentioned, there are a few that I liked, but the rest, much like the story, was just bland. Just to clarify, I don't think this was terrible or anything, so don't get the wrong idea. There were good moments that kept me interested, but much like the last episode, this one was nothing to write home about. Season 4, Episode 21, Marge in Chains. Marge gets busted for shoplifting at the Quickie Mart and is sentenced to a month in prison. Some trivia is that the devil costume that Homer wears when he visits Marge in prison is the evil Homer outfit from his imaginary sequence in Whacking Day. So yeah, it relates to the previous episode. The best moment for me was Lionel Hutz changing his tie in court. Marge in Chains gets a 3 out of 5 here. Well, Act 1 of this feels very topical at the moment, with it revolving around a virus that came from China. Indeed, this episode has got kind of a lot of mentions in recent times and a lot of traction saying that The Simpsons predicted the coronavirus, and I'm not really going to get into talking about the coronavirus because I have my own opinions on all of that, but this isn't really the time or place for me to say them, so I'm going to leave it at that. Putting that aside though, It is the stress that puts on Marge that leads to her inadvertently stealing from the Quickie Mart. In terms of what I feel about the Marge storyline, it is nothing that we haven't seen before in regards to how much she does for her family. Also, it does not really end up going anywhere or having any real impact for me. It's just a bunch of crazy stuff that happens randomly. Not to mention that the ending of everyone in town suddenly loving her and missing her feels kind of rushed and is not really believable to me. The saving grace here, though, of course, is Mr. Hutz. Pretty much all of the best moments come from him, with great lines and moments such as repeatedly running over the judge's son, changing his tie of course, and the world without lawyers fantasy. Its presence alone is enough to elevate the comedy from mediocre to reasonably good, and makes this episode a decent one overall. Seriously, without him, this might even be a 2 out of 5, but Lionel Hutz alone does elevate the episode quite a lot. Season 4, Episode 22, Krusty Gets Cancelled. When the Gabbo show causes Krusty to get cancelled, Krusty quickly lets himself go. However, he's embarked a vow to get Krusty back by organising a comeback special with many celebrity guests. So some trivia here is that Marge does not actually speak at all in this episode, but her voice actress Julie Kavner still is credited. This is the first time in the show that one of the main family members, excluding Maggie of course, does not get a single line. The best moment for me was the Worker and Parasite cartoon. What the hell was that? So the season finale here, does it end the season on a good note? Yes, for me it does. It gets a 5 out of 5. Well, this is certainly a star-studded episode, and it's probably the first time that the show went all in on a celebrity cast pushing the plot of the episode. I think it works pretty well here though, as they're all given their moments and chance to shine, and most of the jokes involving them work pretty naturally, and slide very naturally into the plot. As far as the Krusty side of things goes, it's pretty much what you'd expect from his character. I do love how he quickly resorts to the pathetic state of trying to bribe people to watch his show with fake checks. Not to mention his slip into full-on depression when he gains loads of weight and is dropping his pants for food on a street corner. Unfortunately for him, another guy is already giving it away for free. At least his show failing brings us the aforementioned Worker and Parasite gag though. That really is a classic, and Krusty's reaction to it gets me every single time. The ending of Krusty's comeback special was also pretty good. It's nice to see him have a somewhat happy ending for a change. In terms of the humour on offer here, it is not the best ever or anything, but the TV references do add something different to what we are used to. So, all in all, I think the season finale was a good end to what has been a great season. So, with that, we get to the end of season 4, and on to my summary for that season. So, when I average out the episode, the average score for this is a 4.3, which is up from last season, which was 4.1, and honestly that is better than I expected. And I did expect it to be good, so that's saying a lot. As far as my top 5 episodes go, the best for me was Last Exit to Springfield. Second was Marge vs. the Monorail. Third was Homer the Heretic. Fourth was Lisa's First Word. And fifth was Mr. Plow. In terms of a bottom 5, once again I didn't think a bottom 5 episodes list is warranted here, as there was not enough stinkers to justify it. Although, there is no prizes for guessing which is my least favourite. It is of course the clip show. So to sum up here about my thoughts for the season, it's pretty obvious by this point that I absolutely love it. I love season 3 also, but this one surprised me in that it managed to be even more consistent and enjoyable than that. I would have expected them to be about the same, but in my opinion season 4 is the stronger of the two. I think the main reason why this season clicked with me so much is because it was very uplifting and was a very feel-good type of experience. Of course there were more serious moments still, and darker moments at times, but in general, the episode seemed to be a bit less gritty, and it was not really afraid to have any wacky moments or happy endings. It probably helps as well that it has Last Exit to Springfield, which is arguably the best episode of all time for me. So yeah, I'm glad that I've had the chance to sit down and watch this collection of episodes again. It's safe to say that this show was really hitting its prime at this point. I will of course be back at some point to review season 5, to see if that can keep up with this excellent standard of programming. Thanks for watching everyone, and of course, at this current time, take care of yourselves. Bye bye guys.